Hello and welcome back to the Behind the Fic podcast. This is a podcast that interviews fanfiction writers and asks them about how all these words got collected on these AO3 and Tumblr and fanfiction.net pages that we all know and love.
Mhm.
The In Calamity's Grasp episode was canceled just because of scheduling things and it just didn't really work out, but we have Snidget here. I just said her name instead of actually letting her introduce herself. But I just wanted to update the audience on that little discrepancy in the schedule, so that's what happened. And people are busy. It's hard to do these things. So Kip is my co-host today.
Hello,
And
hello.
my guest, who I already said the name of, but she can say her own name too.
It is Snidgetwidgeon.
Yes.
Hello,
And would you
everyone.
introduce yourself?
Happy to be here, finally. Yes. Oh, yes, so introductions. So I have, in the past, done fanfic, maybe over like 15 years ago in high school. Did a little bit of the Harry Potter here and there. Did a little bit of anime stuff here and there. But wasn't really part of the Zelda fandom, even though at the time I was playing the games. So fast forward to about 3 years ago, I picked up a little game called Breath of the Wild and got back into Zelda. Once I finished that game, I was so bereft. I was so sad it was over that it finally catapulted me back into searching for fanfics, getting inspired to write fanfics, and I ended up starting a little story called Insurrection, which turned out to be huge because I didn't know that my outline meant that I would write so many words. But besides that one, I've got this lovely Son of Hylia, Daughter of Farore fic that came about from a fic exchange in my other Discord group. Past guest, Dr. Steggy, was my choice, and her prompts sort of centered around the idea of role swap AUs, and I know she really appreciated the fleshing out of a relationship between Urbosa and Link in terms of nurturing, and then just discover having a go at what their dynamics would be. So I incorporated that into this role swap fic where Link is the prince, Zelda is the champion, and Urbosa is an instrument of bringing them together to follow their destiny, altered as it is.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Very interesting. I almost started talking about the fic. We're gonna read it first. So you said there's no trigger warnings.
Oh yes, there's no trigger warnings. Little bit of scariness, little bit of violence, but nothing.
As you do when it comes to the most romantic of situations.
I know. Yes, so
all
it
romance
is
involves violence.
Just a little bit of violence.
Just a little bit of violence.
This one's got the hint of romance, but it's more about Link's journey as Link's journey as finding his way as possibly being Hylia's chosen.
Yeah, I'd said romance because that's what I usually write, but like this fic in particular is more about destiny and those kind of things. Yeah.
All right. Are we ready to start?
Default this is a link, so that's my bad.
Yeah, I know.
Turn that off.
Hey, there's a little bit of a link in here, and there's room for me to expound on it in the future should I ever wish to.
So whenever you're ready, go ahead and start your reading.
Okay. Son of Hylia, daughter of Farore.
Link awoke suddenly, desperately trying to cling to the vision of a woman surrounded by bright light as it diminished from his foggy mind. Try as he might to enter back into the haze of his mysterious dream, sounds came louder and clearer to his ears, and he registered the rustle of the sheets sliding against his feet as he stretched, his senses slowly returning.
Today would be a trying affair. He always remained fatigued after she appeared to him, ever speaking, yet rendered frustratingly silent. Perhaps he could try to lay low, hide in the library, and search yet again on the shelves he'd already scoured for something he may have missed. Something to prove it was possible that he was having the visions vessels were known to have had. He just couldn't interpret them. He spared a bittersweet thought for his late mother. She would have known, would have showed him. Or perhaps she would have bore a daughter, and there would be no question, and he could have supported his sister when they found out the calamity was foretold to return. But the kingdom of Hyrule was left with a prince at the precipice of doom. He'd never felt more useless or more determined to do something about it. He would find a way. He would protect everyone. Zelda shifted her feet, practicing her forms to warm up before training. She missed her scimitar. This new blade felt so different, and she had to relearn how to make it an extension of herself. It was humbling when sparring partners she had previously bested came out on top. It just proved she still had much to learn and needed to become proficient with many weapon types if she wanted to be the greatest. She recalled being a bit intimidated as her group of friends grew over the years. Where they used to be physical equals, they now towered above her. But she supposed she could be thankful for the challenge because it caused her to become an incredibly scrappy fighter, always looking for openings she could wheedle into. This time, she wheedled too far and forgot to watch her flank while in pursuit of one of her opponents. Another warrior swept in and bashed her ribs as she was on an upswing, and it sent her flying. As she was pulled up, she couldn't help but think spitefully that the same would not have happened if she were allowed her weapon of choice. She could have recovered with her scimitar, but the swing on the master sword was different. Nice air you caught there, her sparring partner teased in Gerudo. Again? Zelda recovered her blade from a few paces away and declined. I think I'll just nurse my wounds and ego for a while, thanks. Suit yourself. I recommend you do solitary for a few days with your new acquaintance. She pointed her chin towards the master sword in Zelda's grip. See if you two can make friends. She winked and ran back to join the fray. Zelda stared down at the sword with slight contempt. Urbosa had told her of the legends she'd learned from the late Queen of Hyrule and her son, Prince Link, that the sword was wielded to protect Hylia, and how the blade itself chose its master and would even communicate. Someone being chosen meant that a storm was likely brewing. Urbosa also mentioned that preparations were being made against some sort of calamity. The word made Zelda's blood run cold, and she knew it was something to be feared. If the sword was not speaking to her, perhaps it chose wrong, and she was not suited to the challenge. She had tried everything she could think of, even hours of meditation, which she hated because she didn't like sitting still for long. But it was all for naught. She wove her way through the stalls and bustle of the marketplace, sword heavy on her back, and day after day it had only served to weigh her down even more. She could no longer stand it. She exited the northwestern gates and ran along the outer wall, heart pounding and sweating all over. She dug a rather shallow and pathetic hole, chucked the sword in, and kicked sand over it before walking away in a huff, muttering, "First the day I found your infuriating silence." She'd been training in the desert when she discovered it, exploring further than she ever had over the dunes, following the statues with their guiding swords. She finally came upon the last one and sheltered under her cloak at its base as a sandstorm passed. Thankfully, it was short, and as she stood to shake as much sand off as she could her person, she noticed something strange in the distance. She could have sworn she'd reached the last statue of the warriors. Perhaps she'd miscounted and there stood another on the horizon, the reflection of its sword glinting brightly in its grasp. Zelda took a drink from her ration, taking note of how much was left before deciding she could manage one more. If anything, it would improve her survival skills. As she neared the solid figure rising out of the sands, she noticed that the sword it held was elaborate. Oddly enough, a scabbard for it was slung over the shoulder, which made it appear that someone had just left it there. She looked around, but only saw a few cacti bearing volt fruits, perfect for carrying around extra moisture for the return trip. Some movement caught her eye behind a cactus, and she ran over, pulling her scimitar, in case there was meat to be had. but she was met with a poof of sparkling petals and could have sworn she heard a childish giggle. After investigating thoroughly, she cut the fruits and placed them into her bag before returning to the statue. It would be a shame to leave such a fine piece of work out here in the middle of nowhere. She climbed the figure and slipped the scabbard off the shoulder, letting it fall to the sand before holding the neck and planting her feet against the torso so she could reach the hilt with her free hand. It did not budge. Hiking herself up, she wrapped her legs around the neck so she could use both hands to pull on the wings above the hilt. She was straining when she heard the laugh again, accompanied by a rattle, and in her distraction, the blade suddenly came loose and they both tumbled into the sand. She'd thought nothing of it until returning to Gerudo Town. During a routine visit to the throne room, Chief Urbosa had nearly sent away visiting dignitaries when she spied the sword on Zelda's back. After the meeting, Urbosa called her into her private quarters, which was very unusual. Perhaps she was to be given a special assignment. "Where did you find that sword?" Urbosa asked with intense interest and a hint of concern. Zelda stood at attention and replied concisely, "In the desert, Chief." "Zelda, have you any idea what you found?" Zelda began to doubt her decision to play finders keepers. Maybe it was a ceremonial sword or relic that should have stayed where it was. Though she had been raised with the Gerudo, she certainly did not purport to know all of their culture and was horrified by the idea that she'd deeply offended them. Urbosa removed her bracelets and hair ornaments, letting the thick red locks fall down her back. Making sure her tea would be in reach, she snuggled into her bed and opened a letter from her favorite Hylian. She always saved his letters for the end of the day when her attention could be undivided and she could imagine actually having a conversation with him. He was so bright and inquisitive and optimistic, as his letter revealed, just like her love. "I have not given up my search. I keep thinking that surely there is a pocket in the library I have not scoured, but then another duty and another day takes me away from it. I see her, Urbosa. It has to mean something. If only I could find evidence that there has been a son of Hylia. Why else would I be given visions? If only I could interpret them. Do you know how Mother did it? Did she ever say anything?" He then went on to describe his involvement with the funding of the research at the Royal Ancient Lab, as well as other gossip that he and Urbosa kept up on, including their inside jokes about stuffy nobles. He also wanted to hear more about the warrior who had pulled the Master Sword. "Does the bearer of the blade that seals the darkness fare well? The moment I learned of her, I hoped that it was a sliver of evidence to prove my case. If there is a woman as Farore's chosen, then perhaps it lends weight to the fact that a man could be Nehru's chosen. But I'm harping. Perhaps I will be able to meet her soon, though Father keeps me tied up in social engagements. He has taken to parading me at events where there are ample amounts of young debutantes to vie for my attention. I'd much rather be studying." Urbosa wrote back early the next morning after skimming the letter again. "It seems our chosen hero is having trouble awakening the power within the blade. When you sent words of legends that say the sword speaks to a worthy master, she immediately felt inadequate. Zelda excels at any challenge and eventually overcomes all obstacles, so when she continually failed to connect with the sword's spirit, she took out her frustrations in a childish manner. The other day she was witnessed burying it in the sand outside the town walls. She must have blown off all her steam because she did retrieve it later that night. I think that learning her fate has been weighing on her. She puts on a stoic face, but I can see she has reservations. Perhaps if you two came together, something will give?" After reading Urbosa's reply, Link laid the parchment back down on his desk and pondered her proposition. He had been wanting to expand his search outside the castle for some time, and though he enjoyed visiting the royal lab, it did not hold any answers for what he sought. They were just a bunch of rowdy mechanics who were a lot of fun to hang around with. But to understand his history and role, he wanted to go on a pilgrimage to the known spiritual sites of Hyrule, and perhaps discover unknown ones as well, so he could be better informed on how to defeat the calamity and possibly awaken the power of Hylia along the way. He would start making arrangements right away. King Rome rapped his knuckles on the door of his son's study. When Link answered with a curt nod and a polite greeting, he entered, leaving his guard detail outside. He thought it prudent to retain at least some privacy for this matter, considering the gossip it could generate. I hear you're planning some sort of trip. It came out as a statement more than a question. A pilgrimage, to try and find any proof of my suspicions. He was interrupted by his father's large, dissatisfied sigh. Link, you really must stop harping on about that nonsense. Hylia has only ever been reincarnated into the mortal body of a female. That's just the way it is. A tradition that extends even far beyond what we have in written history. Exactly. We don't know everything. How do you explain my visions? Mother had them. She knew how to interpret them. Perhaps they're just dreams, Rome offered again in a misguided attempt to engage. Link smacked the book he was about to pack on the table in frustration. I can't believe you keep saying that. You just don't understand. What I understand is that you continue to foolishly insist on chasing dreams and fantasies rather than doing something tangible for your people. You're wasting time, Link. You should be courting and choosing a wife so that you can pass on the bloodline to a potential princess who will. Rome saw the shock in his boy's face and tried to change track. We have no idea when the calamity will strike. We should be doing everything we can to prevent disaster. Link clenched his jaw as a deep anger and loathing swelled in his breast. Voice trembling in rage, he rebutted, I am not going to produce an heir just to send her to the slaughter. I will fight my own battles. The calamity is coming down on us. I just need to figure out how to awaken Hylia's power. He grabbed his bag and stormed out before Rome could push his agenda further. The next letter Urbosa received from Link outside his travels. She grinned. Oh, sorry. We'll have to cut back to the beginning of this. The next letter Urbosa received from Link outlined his travels. She grinned as she read through them, glad that he'd managed to get away. The Forgotten Temple was very difficult to access, and though it did not produce any results, it was a breathtaking trip. It has the largest goddess statue I have ever seen, and I felt a particular familiarity while standing under her benevolent smile. I think this is promising. We're now at the ruins of the Temple of Time on the Great Plateau. I'm no stranger to the place, of course, but the priestess has been most helpful in providing old texts to study that were not available at the castle. She's even offered to assign a scribe to make copies for me. I hope to be underway again soon, and I would like to visit the 7 heroines. I want to leave no stone unturned. I shall send a dispatch for when we expect to be arriving in the desert. When the time came, Urbosa bid Zelda to be an escort for the prince across the sands to Gerudo town. Listen carefully, Zelda. Being the prince is more than reason enough to keep him safe, but there may be a chance that he is so much more. The fact that you wield that sword lends weight to his theory that he may be Hylia reborn. Zelda's eyes widened, but she remained silent, nodding dutifully. I'll need you to deliver some supplies to him so that he may enter unmolested upon arrival. Chief? Zelda asked, uncertain about the order. Hylia possibly being in a boy she could handle, but in all her time there she'd never heard of a Vo entering Gerudo town. For Urbosa to speak of it almost as if it were done every other day was confusing, to say the least. Urbosa raised her brow at the question. He is my Oten Devi and knows how to behave within these walls. You need not concern yourself with the politics, just act as his personal guard. Yes, Chief. She made her preparations and checked that all was secure with the contraband. The idea of meeting the prince was troubling, to say the least. She felt completely inadequate, bearing a sword that considered her unworthy. Perhaps she could pass it on to him and he could find the most courageous person in Hyrule. With his resources, she was sure it wouldn't be that hard. Then again, legendary swords weren't known for choosing incorrect heroes, so what was wrong with her? They would just have to work together somehow. She rode most of the way at a leisurely pace behind her sand seal until she noticed a scuffle as she neared Karakara. Hup! She directed her seal to go a bit faster to investigate. A couple of Hylian Vai shrieked when they saw her. The prince! Please save our prince, they cried as they pointed west. There were 2 Yiga chasing after a nimble blonde clad in light blue. She sprung after them, tongue rolling in a call to let her mount know they needed to go as fast as if they were fleeing a Molduga. The prince was doing well for himself until he fell, a prey disposition coming over him. He scooted back but could only stare at the assassins, frozen in fear. Zelda used her inertia to whip across the sand and jump to land between the prince and his attackers. She drew her sword, imbued with courage and confident that she could easily protect the boy against the likes of this desert rabble. She almost became distracted by the sword's sudden glow before exchanging blows with the masked Yiga. They soon realized they were no match for her and dispersed in pops of red and orange light, laughter echoing in their place. Breathing heavily, she turned back to face the prince, who was still flat on his bum. They both ogled the glowing sword. An ethereal, disembodied voice broke the silence. Master, it is good to see you again. Their eyes snapped to each other and searched for understanding. There was an immediate and unmistakable bond between them. They both heard it. I see, Zelda began. She glared down at the master sword, fist clenching the handle and shaking with anger. So you only deign to speak when your charge is present? Her voice rose. I wasn't good enough for you? You picky piece of she yelled as she hurled the sword into the dunes. Link gaped in disbelief that his protector was so uncouth when something profound occurred to him. He fell back into the sand laughing, a massive wave of relief washing over him. She looked at him curiously. What? What is it? His laughter died down and he gazed into the sky, moisture glistening in the corner of his eye. She's with me. Zelda's eyebrows knitted in confusion, unaware of the turmoil he had experienced regarding his identity. Link stood and brushed himself off, then held out his hand in greeting. You must be Zelda, bearer of the blade that seals the darkness. She accepted his shake and added spitefully, more like the blade that won't open up its trap unless its mommy is around. You know, I find it very intriguing. My mother's name was also Zelda. Yes, my mother was a big fan. It's kind of flattering. She was a great lady. But people always joke that I'm the lost secret princess and other nonsense. She started to move away, but he touched her arm and she paused. Thank you for saving my life, but also for revealing the truth. Now that I know she's here, he touched his heart. I will find her. Zelda eyed him like a strange bug, still unsure as to what he was on about. She patted his shoulder as she walked over to retrieve her weapon. Good luck with that. A few nights later, Link and Urbosa took a stroll just outside of town to enjoy each other's company, catching up on their daily lives. The stars twinkled brightly and the moon shone pale on the dunes, a steady breeze drifting the sands away to the dark horizon. He'd just intimated what his father would have him do to stay the coming calamity. She touched his shoulder in support. And what did you say? That this was our battle, and I would absolutely not have a child just to... He sighed deeply. I mean, I know the legends. There will always be a vessel of Hylia and her chosen hero, but to be so deliberate and unfeeling about it, It's all right. Your father has always been rather blunt and practical to a fault. For what it's worth, I believe in you. The visions you describe sound very similar to what your mother shared with me. He looked up to her with a smile. It's worth a lot. You're my Oten Baba. Your opinion matters to me more than anyone else. They continued on for a short time in companionable silence when Urbosa stopped and lifted her head to the night, listening and placing a hand on her scimitar. What is it? Link asked, only noticing after he'd taken a few steps ahead. A raucous laughter cut across the desert, and as quick as Urbosa had been to draw her blade and prepare a snap of deadly electricity over her foes, 2 of them grabbed the prince and held their sickles to his neck, causing her to stay her hand. What a lovely package we have here tonight! Not only can we bag the boy, we can finally rid ourselves of the thorn in our side, Gerudo Tempest! A Yiga foot soldier, hidden amongst the rest, spat the last 2 words out in disgust. They attacked, and dozens fell upon the chief, running head-on and popping up behind. A dance of blades began, and Link struggled to free himself. Urbosa tried to lead her foes away, but Link's captors followed, dragging his feet through the sand. "You'll not be using your lightning with the precious prince so close, will you?" gloated the same antagonizing voice. Link cried out in terror when he saw Yiga succeed in cutting her arm. She seethed and decked them right across the jaw. When they fell, she jumped onto their back and launched herself in the air so she could shoot off a bolt. "Oh no! Is the Tempest in distress?" the voice goaded, and the masks cackled. Link couldn't tell where the mocking was coming from. They were everywhere and nowhere at once. There were too many. Urbosa was becoming overwhelmed, and aid may not arrive in time. A gash landed on her leg. He was going to lose her. The laughing was getting louder, the air becoming so thick with magic that it tasted like chalk on his tongue. A slice was delivered up her back, and she cried out. He squeezed his eyes shut and thought of his mother. What would she do? There hadn't been anything he could do for her then. But he was near. He was here now, for his living mother. Link's eyes shot open just in time to see Urbosa drowning under the onslaught, and his insides fell into oblivion. They were replaced by a warmth that spread through his body and beyond. He jerked his head in confusion as those that held him fell away. He was free. Sparks, akin to those he felt when he fell asleep on his hand in the library, spread through his fingers, and he launched himself into the foray. He clawed through Yiga soldiers to get to her and did not see how each one he yanked was thrown back with a force of golden energy. "Urbosa! Urbosa!" They hit the ground. The desert was lit with a false sunrise as Link crushed Urbosa in a desperate embrace. The light washed over her, healing her wounds as it cascaded around them in a dome, their enemies lying motionless on the outside. After a few stunned moments, they opened their eyes and picked each other up. Urbosa held his face in her hands and wiped his tears. "Just look at you," she said, smiling proudly. I couldn't. I was..." He stumbled over his words as more tears fell. "I was going to lose you. I couldn't lose you too," he cried into her chest, and she held him close. Link was a natural at seal surfing. That's what Zelda thought before she realized that he must have actually visited Gerudo Town previously, and she just didn't know it. They had left at sunrise and arrived to their destination mid-morning. After taking a much-needed rest, rehydrating, and snacking, Link took a leisurely walk around the place to get his bearings while Zelda tended to the sand seals. She joined him after they were settled for a long siesta, and the two of them began their research of the 7 heroines in interest. There were orbs scattered around the place. Very large, Link noticed. He pushed one with his foot. And heavy. The sand seals might have to work after all. He tasked Zelda with collecting any she could find, and in the meantime he studied the statues, picking up rather quickly that some had prominent corresponding symbols to the orbs on various parts of their bodies. Some he couldn't make out as they were too high, so there would be some educated guesses by process of elimination. Zelda couldn't help being drawn into his enthusiasm, the way he took notes, the face he made when he took those notes. And it was all very quaint and a bit impressive. Having spent most of her time advancing physically, she appreciated the mental gymnastics they were doing. Where most might sit back defeated, Link pushed through with a calm determination. They tried dropping the orbs and the pedestals in numerous combinations, each with a sound theory behind them. How was Link supposed to know that if shrines had been activated, he would have succeeded in getting a result on the first try? A fact that they both wouldn't learn for another 103 odd years. After the sunset, Link scrawled until the dimming light rendered the page unreadable. Zelda had already set about making camp. They could head back to town in the morning. Both were knackered. Even with the help of the seals, they'd heaved plenty of orbs around for hours. Eventually, he plopped down on the rug with her and heaved a big sigh. "Wow, you've been working all day or something?" she asked in jest as he turned the vegetables in the fire. "Yeah, something like that. It's been a long while since I've been out in the field." She regarded him thoughtfully. "What's it like up at the castle?" "Stuffy." She chuckled and didn't press, but it wouldn't be fair to leave it at that. For all its faults, it deserved more. "I loved exploring the halls as a boy. I'm fairly certain I found long lost passages, even the castle historian didn't know about. My favorite places are the library and the observatory. Sounds about right, Zelda smirked. Ha ha. But really, the library has books as far as you can see. You'd never finish them in one lifetime. And my mother used to take me to the observatory. I still go there to feel close to her. They sat in silence for a moment when Zelda touched his forearm. I'm sorry you lost her. Link nodded in thanks, and Zelda started to collect the hardy truffles from the coals. I lost my father, she began, and Link was a bit surprised she was sharing. He was a knight. We didn't have any other family close by, and Mom didn't fancy moving to Tabantha village. She hates the cold, Zelda added as she passed Link a stick laden with dinner. Thanks. So she just came to the desert instead? Link asked before plowing generously and taking a bite. She had a close friend here who is practically my auntie. I think she was hoping we could just get away and start fresh from everything we knew before. But then I had to take after Dad. Took her a while and a lot of arguments to come to terms with the fact that I was also a warrior. She shook her head. I feel bad. I've put her in a constant fear of losing me too, but you have to do what your soul tells you, right? Link closed his eyes and thought of Hylia, feeling a vibration in his core. Right, he agreed thoughtfully. Anyway, then this happened, she said, unsheathing the sword on her back a few inches and letting it fall back in with a shink. That was not a fun conversation. I can imagine, Link commiserated as he thought of his own recent rows with his father. Zelda took a bite of her own truffle and regarded him up and down. With no tact for manners, she said with a full mouth, You're all right for a prince. Link laughed and his genuine mirth spread warmth through Zelda's chest. And you're all right for a hero. The end.
Very good. I was very impressed by your voices.
Oh, thanks.
Urbosa, like I literally was like, is she actually Elizabeth Maxwell? Like, is Snidgetwidgeon like the Urbosa voice actor in disguise?
I'm proud of my Urbosa. Thank you
Yeah.
very
Yeah,
much.
you had great voice acting for
All of
your
them are really good
characters.
though. Oh,
Yeah.
anyway, I'm glad that was recorded. Now everyone can enjoy that. Camp, why don't you ask the first question since you have 4?
All right, sure. So
I can math.
Math. Yeah, okay.
Math?
Like math in this, I was about to say like math in this writing podcast or fic podcast. I could never. Like no. Anyway. So when you were writing this rule swap, AU, how did you decide what elements of the original characters you could like keep and translate, and what elements that you could change based on their new backgrounds and stuff? No rules, yeah.
Yeah, new rules. Well, Urbosa's pretty much the same. She has a loving relationship with who she feels to be basically her adopted son in Link, similar to how she shares that role with Zelda in the normal storyline. And Link, because he's taking on the role of the prince, he's got a bit more of a science bend. He's interested in the history, interested in learning about the things basically that Zelda's learning about when she's the princess normally. But what I found was a pretty good twist was what would the arguments or the problems be between him and Rome that would be different than Rome and Zelda, for instance,
Right.
because they have, gender changes quite a lot more than we think it would, rather than just, a couple personality traits. And it's like, well, if everyone always thinks that Hylia is only ever going to be in a female and Link is demanding that it's him and nobody believes him, what would his role be in that destiny and in that storyline? And it's, oh gosh, he's just like cattle to pump out new royals, right? So that they can get that girl that will be the vessel for Hylia. And how useless would that make him feel, or how valueless? And I was really proud of that scene because it came to me that Rome would just see him as a sower of the royal oats, and
Mm-hmm.
it just
Mhm.
it really got to me in that regard. And Zelda, making her a fighter, I thought, gosh, wouldn't it be funny if she was just a bit hot-headed? Because
Right.
when she's her normal self, she's has to be so reserved and put on a face for everybody and be that princess that everybody's just talking behind her back anyway. So if she didn't have that role and she was able to just be herself a bit more, I thought, you know what, she's gonna be a little spitfire and have some potty mouth sometimes and get
Yeah.
mad at her own dang sword. And that was really funny to write when she's burying it and yelling at it. And it's one of my friend's favorite scenes as well. So that went over really well when I was planning
Mhm.
for Zelda.
And you said it really
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
I really like. I don't know. Sometimes you come across scenes in fics where it's like it's written so well you can really see it, and
Yeah.
I came across that alone reading this fic where the characters were written so well and everything was explained so well. I was like, okay, I'm in it. I
Yeah.
completely believe it. You know.
I
That's
especially
wonderful.
enjoyed your characterization of Zelda because I always like to think like I think it was mostly just because of her royal position as princess. Because if that was
Mm.
taken away, I think she would have acted exactly like how you portray her in the fic, just like prepared to like talk off and like not take any shit.
just just let the girl yell.
Exactly. All right, Fate, you wanna?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're so good at the transitions.
Yes.
This is yeah, this is kind of similar. Although the roles have been reversed, Zelda and Link still have some of the same qualities as their Breath of the Wild counterparts. In your opinion, how much of who we are depends on how we are nurtured, and how much depends on nature?
Mm. Yeah, that is a very similar question, and that I delved into what I thought they would be like. Basically, if their roles were reversed. I mean, that's the point of the
Mm-hmm.
the character study of the story. It's fun to imagine different roles for your favorite characters doing different things. And um, I thought Link would have that quiet drive, similar as he does when he's the champion. He's just tenacious and he will not give in, and
Mm-hmm.
he kept that quality. And Zelda, I mean, I guess in an opposite way, she goes through some trouble and stumbles
Mm-hmm.
on whether or not it's her destiny and is she worthy. I mean, just as we imagine Link would do when he pulled his sword. I mean, we in the games he's only ever really confident, but so many people write about what's going on in his mind when he discovers he's the hero. And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
well, Zelda would also go through that. She's
Right.
not going to be any different. So that's
Yeah.
how I liked to imagine them.
Yeah.
All
So
right. Oh,
yeah,
Good
it's
question.
the
mhm.
same. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Sorry, I thought you wanted to say something. All right. So, what? So when you were writing Link, and his role as he is like, well, obviously it's implied that he is actually the reincarnated version of Hylia instead of it usually being a girl. What do
Mm.
you think, world building wise? What other things are affected now that the Hylia is a guy, seemingly in this kingdom?
To be honest, I kept this as sort of a window sandbox exercise where this was really just down to him and how he's feeling and what he wants to pursue, and then how Zelda comes into that and reacts, and how Urbosa is getting them together, and of course how he's defying his father. But it's being the type of exchange that it was, in a certain amount of words. It wasn't meant to be like a sweeping epic. I sort of I consciously thought of it as a window into this alternate universe. And I didn't really think beyond that. So if I ever wanted to expound upon the story, I could delve into how it would affect the wider kingdom, his interactions with other cultures like the Zora. Like, what would his relationship be like with Mifa? It's I
Yeah.
didn't extend out into thinking about that just because this was a window into this
Mm-hmm.
sandbox. So
Mhm.
yeah, if I ever come back to this story for another play around, then that's something I would definitely enjoy imagining and thinking about. So thanks
Yeah.
for those prompting thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. No, I'm full of prompting thoughts because I love role swap use because I know you said that you don't think about it a lot, but after you're reading your fic, I was thinking about it a lot.
Yeah.
I was like,
Whoa.
especially like in the sense that since you're putting Link in this position that Zelda was in, I kind of like that he has these different anxieties that
Mm,
like both Link and Zelda had their anxieties as like these royals that had to like find their power. But I
yeah.
think like Link had his anxiety since like he was a guy, so it was like reverse not misogyny, but like it was like not a patriarchy, so he had to like suffer from
Yeah,
that in like
really.
his in Hyrule and stuff.
I
And now
suppose
that you
I
mention
think
it, he would have a really cool relationship with like Mipha now, because or if at all in this
yeah. Now that you
universe, right?
mention that, I suppose I did touch on it just a tiny bit, where he's forced to go to these social engagements, and
Right, yeah.
Rome is parading him around possible brides, and even though Hylia comes to him, is Rome still gonna push that on him? I'm sure he is. Like,
Yeah.
he's gonna
Yeah.
still be pressuring Link to get him, like, it's your
Mm-hmm.
duty, you're this age, this is what we do. How about that Mifa chick over in Zora Kingdom? Yeah, there's definitely the potential for that, because he would be having to kiss up to the other nations, wouldn't he? And try and find, or there's so many arranged marriage fics between Zelda and other countries slash cultures in
Mm.
Hyrule. So I bet Link
Yeah.
would also be having to go through that problem.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um. So kind of related, and I hope it's different enough so that you're talking about the same stuff. But so King Roman's AU puts pressure on his son to pass the bloodline on to a princess
Mm,
more potentially
mm.
capable of accessing the sealing power. I've typed this all up beforehand, so I don't like stutter. So it's all like perfectly sentencized. So this him pressuring his son in this way shows like a severe lack um in his son to ever like he doesn't care. Like he's like
Oh yeah, he's like,
there's
no, it's
absolutely no way
Yeah.
that he could be
never
highly
happened.
reincarnated.
Like, why are we even entertaining
Yeah,
it? Stop being a dork and go get married.
exactly.
He's holding
So
us
in
all up.
your oh sorry. So
Yeah,
in
yeah,
your
no.
opinion, do you think that King Roman Breath of the Wild would have eventually made this request of his daughter? Like, would he have gotten to a point where it's like, okay, this is not happening?
Oh,
Uh,
you mean like if the
yeah.
calamity wasn't in their lifetime?
If it seemed like a calamity was in their lifetime, where it was kind of like if it was an amorphous kind of thing, like it is in this fic,
Mm.
where it's like calamities might be coming now,
Oh yeah,
ish,
because the sword has chosen somebody. It's
right?
a possible shitstorm.
So like, do you think it would have gotten to the point where King would have been like, okay, this isn't happening. Let's find a man. You know. So do you
Right.
think he was getting to that point of not having faith in Zelda, or do you think he still had um
Oh yeah,
more
don't
faith in
touch
Zelda?
on what Rome would have thought as Zelda as a champion.
Mhm.
In my little corner of writing world, I like to place a lot of equality on, my canon of Hyrule. So,
Mhm.
especially in my other story, Insurrection, there's knights of all types, and nobody blinks twice about it. So,
Right.
I think that Zelda being the champion is much less of a concern to Rome as Link thinking he's Hylia's reborn, because that's just ridiculous. So. I reckon that Rome would have been supportive of Zelda in this instance, and especially since she came so highly regarded by Urbosa. There's a big history between them, and if she has Urbosa's confidence, then I imagine she would have Rome's confidence as well.
I think you misunderstood my question. I was asking about like
Oh,
in Breath of the Wild.
ah,
like
Sorry, you'll have to do it again, but I
okay.
still made a cool
I'm
answer for
sorry.
another
Maybe it was a bad question, but I was asking like in Breath of
No.
the Wild if like Breath of the Wild, like not this fic, but like
Yeah.
yeah, like as if King Rome had so little faith in his
Own daughter.
daughter that
Okay.
he would have pressured her to find
Oh.
yeah.
Oh, I see what you mean, like, your
Yeah.
powers aren't awakening, go make a baby,
Yeah.
and maybe that'll be
Exactly. So like
Hylia.
I'm asking
Oh.
like did he have so little faith in her that eventually he might have done that, and then how that like contrasts with Link being in this like because Link in this
Mm.
is in the situation. I just thought, okay,
Yeah.
does
Well,
this have
yes,
to do with King Rome's faith in his
I
daughter?
can definitely answer that. I mean, we do in Breath of the Wild, we do get that snippet from his journal,
Hmm.
where he's like, "Oh, look, she's finally literally done everything she
Right,
possibly could, and it's still not happening. I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, you know what? It's sort of like he just gave in, and he's like,
right, right.
well, I'll let her, do her thing when she gets back, basically.
Hmm.
So
Right,
I think all of that stress that he was putting on her might have ebbed after that. And the tragedy is they never got the chance.
right,
So it's just so upsetting that they had the potential to make up. And my own headcanon is that he wasn't always like that. That
right. Yeah,
initially he
yeah.
was a good
Mm.
father and they loved each other very much, but as the calamity looms ever closer and he's dealing with all the demands, he just some people can't cope, and he ended
Mhm.
up lashing out at his loved ones, and it's unfortunate, but it's like, you know what, some people just
Yeah.
can't, and that's the kind of character he was. But I'd like to think that they could make up, and I definitely would like it to be different than they portrayed in Age of Calamity. That was a little, it was a bit fix it. um, I like the game a lot. But I do, yeah, don't consider that to be canon at all. But it was heading in a nice direction, and it's a nice feeling that they could make up. And but yeah, I mean, if you want to headcanon something entirely different,
Right,
ignoring the journal response, maybe he would just keep spiraling downward and downward, and it's very possible that he'd be like, okay, it's not you, uh, go have some
right.
kids, and we'll try and find the next one, right? It's
Hmm.
obviously skipped you. Give up and get over it.
Right. Well, so in short, you're saying that um in Breath of the Wild canon, King Rome has more faith in his offspring than
Yeah.
in your fic, where he
Oh,
has
yes.
no
Yeah,
faith, and like that's kind of the
absolutely. Yeah.
larger question I was asking, which is interesting. The difference between those two relationships, kind of. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
the thought exercise is it's what intrigued me the most was thinking about
hmm,
those gender differences in their
yeah,
relationship dynamics. That was really
yeah,
fun for me in this story.
yeah. It was fun to read
Yeah.
because your thought experiments like turned into like cohesive story that then like gave your audience thought experiments, and it's just like
Yes.
whoa.
Oh,
So
it's the
yeah,
best. The joys of fandom.
yes.
Yeah. All right. So here, I just realized one of my questions was just kind of answered already. So we'll just go to number 4.
Right.
So, um, what do you think? Um, the do you think that there could have been any differences, if at all, with Zelda and Link's parentage now that they've kind of like swapped roles? So, how is like the role swaps? Do you think affected their upbringing? I know it was kind of answered, but let's just like focus on it more, I guess.
Yeah, no, I imagine Link's upbringing to be really similar to Zelda's. He
Mhm.
would have all of his classes, his studies, his whatevers that he's doing to learn, how to be a ruler while at the same time he does have his scientific interests. But then, as we were
Yeah.
discussing, he's harping on about, I must be the vessel, it is me,
Yeah.
because we don't have
Just
any
like
other
that.
kids in the family, and I'm seeing the things, and And you all don't believe me just because mom is gone, and she would know, and it's a tragedy. Um, but with Zelda's parents, I, thought, well, yeah, the father, keep it as a father, also a knight, but how would I had to think about why is Zelda in Gerudo Town? Like, why is she growing up there? So once the father passed away, I say her mother's friends with some ladies in Gerudo Town, and she doesn't want to go live with whatever relies they have left up in the cold, terrible like mountains. Tabantha, like who wants to live there? I'm also an incredible weenie in the cold, so I just put a little bit of myself in Zelda's mom and was like,
Honestly,
nope,
it's mostly
we're
just Dorito
moving.
because they have those feathers. Like,
Yeah, right.
without the
Yeah,
feathers, like,
I
no
know.
Hylian's gonna want to go there.
It's much better as a ghost town, really. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding.
Wow.
Yeah, so I had to think about Zelda's parent dynamics in the terms of how did she get to Gerudo Town, and that's what I came up with. So the fact
Yeah.
that her dad died sort of mirrors the fact that when we're playing Breath of the Wild, um, Link's dad had also died from the calamity. We're assuming.
Mm.
We don't.
Mhm.
It's troubling to still not even know what happened, but that's the fun of being a
100
fic
years is a
writer.
long time. I think he's gone.
Yeah,
No,
Yeah.
he's probably no longer there.
I meant in terms of like when he was alive.
Yeah, of
Zelda was
course. Yeah.
saying
Yeah.
you take after your father, but I mean, there's nothing saying that he was alive at that time as well.
Right.
So we just don't know. So yeah, that's how Zelda got to Gerudo Town, and that's how her parent dynamics helped that happen. And I think that Link's parental dynamics were just pretty much the same in that he lost his mother at too young an age, and she wasn't able to guide him, and his father was getting more troubled and more demanding, and just didn't know how to deal.
Right.
Yeah. And it's actually interesting that you insinuate that like Link's dad is like kind of like died blah, died during the calamity, because it kind of like works into like the way this rule swap has went, because I've always thought that Link had, like, obviously there's no canon evidence for this, but I always thought that Link's dad had like a more caring father figure
Oh yes,
than like Zelda's, or like it wasn't necessarily as like strict or harsh as like one might think it is. But obviously there's nothing there. That's just me with my little fan fiction brain, like thinking of stuff. So
Right.
it's kind of interesting to see like when you like swapped them in like this fic, um, that like Link now is the one that's dealing with a more harsh like treatment and expectations as someone of like the royal
mm,
family. And
hmm
Zelda, since she's not part of the royal family, I know obviously here she still has that more like expectations from her father a little bit, but it's kind of like there's a weight off her shoulders now since she's no longer like a royal in this universe, at least. And it's just really interesting to see how like that trickles down into from their parents and environment to their actual like personality and stuff. And it's really like, because it's not usually how I interpret it, and it's cool to see it like this, you know?
I usually imagine Link with a lovely father figure, as I outline in Insurrection as well. They have a wonderful
Yeah.
relationship. His father is supportive and helps him grow as a person and a fighter. But I'm so glad I thought to mention this, is I should have brought in Urbosa into this answer, because
Oh
Link,
yeah, she's obviously more present here than
she is
like
his,
in.
and he even says it, like his thoughts, like he couldn't do anything about his own mother, but he can save his second mother, sort of his
Mhm.
mother figure.
Yeah.
And actually, I did use some terms. I did some research on the Gerudo language, and you may have heard
Yeah.
some
Oh yeah, the Oten the
It,
blah, blah,
like,
blah,
I
blah.
was
Otambaba
wondering if
and
that was like
Otandevi.
researched or like that you made it up, and like either way, I'm like, oh, that sounds
Yeah.
that
I
I
sounds
did
like
I
googled it. I
Gerudo.
know the
researched and
second part meant like daughter, but I have no idea what like the first part is, so I just gave up.
yeah.
I just
Okay,
decided you
so
can do
I'll
that.
what I did was look at the very limited list of Gerudo words that we get, and I was like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, how can I extrapolate from this? And Oten, I thought, oh yes, I think it sort of means like sort of sky or heaven. And then I thought, well, that's close enough to being like God child or God mother. It's
Right.
like a heaven mother or a heaven child. And Vevi, I think I've just, decided to make it as like a child rather than specifically a girl, because Link is a boy. So when Urbosa calls him her Oten Vevi, it's like my godchild. And when he calls her Oten Baba, it's like godmother, basically. So I just,
Cute.
extrapolated from the words that we had and gave it a little working twist so that it could
Yeah.
sound really, you know, what's the word? True? I don't know. True sounding, like legitimate.
Yeah.
It
A
sounds
little bit of depth
It's just
and fleshing
world
out of
building, sparkle
very
yeah,
stuff.
world
believable. Very
building.
believable world building. I was very. It just fit right
To
in
have
there.
an endearing term thrown in there, it just was
Yeah.
a very nice
Yeah.
cherry on the top to add to the story.
I had no idea that the vit whatever meant child, because when I googled it, it only came up as daughter. So I thought it was a whole thing where like, oh, because they don't have a word for son because they're Gerudo and they're all
Exactly. So I was
girls,
like,
and I was
you know what?
like,
Making an educated guess that it
yeah,
can just, for my canon in this story, it can also mean
Right.
child, not just daughter,
yeah,
because to them all children are girls. So it's like, well, it could be daughter or it could just be the child because this one happens to be a boy.
yeah.
Right.
I didn't want to change it up too much, like Vevo or whatever, because I don't know how they would conjugate their things. So it's like, that can also mean child. That's fine.
Yeah.
All right.
I have one last question, and you can choose to answer it as much or as little as you want.
Hmm.
Um, if you were to expand upon this fic, where might things go? And since you mentioned like that you might do it in the future, you don't have to do too much, but like maybe talk about where you picture things going when you first wrote it.
Yes, so as I said earlier, this one hints at the Link, but it was more focused
Mm-hmm.
on Link's, discovering his destiny and
Right.
finding his purpose and his connection with Hylia, and then also his mother-son relationship with Urbosa.
Mm-hmm.
But with that hint of the Link at the end, that's where I fully would would take it. Like it becomes a Link
Right.
romance for sure. And then they would just be dealing with the progression of the calamity in their new roles. So I would
Mm.
get to explore that and work out their dynamics as having their opposite roles together. So that would be pretty fun.
And you hinted in your not really hinted, you said it pretty clearly that the whole 103-year statement. So
Oh yeah.
basically, you're stating that they're gonna fail, which is really interesting because like it makes the claim that calamity
Yeah,
is
the
even more
same
inevitable. Like even with these reversed roles,
it
like
still happens.
it's
Yeah.
still a catastrophe.
Yep.
And that's also
Yeah.
really interesting.
A delicious
Yeah,
cherry of angst. You
Yes.
know?
I know. Yes. And I liked adding that, well, if he'd only known that blah 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 and
Yeah.
this would happen. It's just sort of like an Easter egg sentence, really. It's just for us to enjoy having these parallels. Like this
Yeah.
story is, just different enough to have cool twists in it and using scenes in a different way, like
Mhm.
how Zelda found the Master Sword, like completely different than, like the King Arthur
Mhm.
pedestal situation. I'm like, you know
Right.
what? A Korok went and put it on a statue for her
Yeah.
because I said so,
Yeah.
because it's funny.
Or
And
or it's like in Harry Potter with the whole like the sword is in the hat. It
yeah.
moves around like it just appeared.
Yes, it could have.
Yeah.
It has got those magical properties, and
Yeah.
the Koroks were the ones looking out for it in
Yeah.
the forest anyway. The Deku tree could have been like, "Oi, go put it over there so she can find it
Yeah,
because
go
she's never
yeah.
in the forest."
She's not coming all the way over here.
No, this is not happening. We got to go to her. So I thought, well, that'd be funny and interesting and different. And then also the way I crafted the recreation of the Karakara Bazaar attack.
Mhm.
There was a bit of a twist in that,
Yep.
and you get to see those parallels, and people are like, oh, this is actually interesting because these similar things are happening, but they're just different enough to be really cool and something
Yeah.
neat to imagine. Like, well, how would Link awaken his powers. For Zelda, it
Mhm.
was when she was protecting him, and I was like, well, how are his going to awaken? He'll protect Urbosa because he
Right.
just adores her, and that's who would awaken his power and his love. And it was just
Mhm.
really wonderful to reimagine that power awakening for Link between him
Right.
and Urbosa.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it great pick. My phone buzzed. I shouldn't even have even looked. That's unprofessional.
A busy,
I'm
busy,
like,
busy.
oh, I'm popular. No, it's just a Twitter notification.
That's
Okay.
always what we think. Somebody's talking to me. Woohoo!
No, they're not. It's
Nope, it's just the world and its
just the world talking to itself.
creations. Yeah.
So I have a question submitted from Tumblr. This is the last Tumblr submitted question I have
Mm-hmm.
for the season of the podcast.
Woohoo!
And it's kind of a oddly like fitting question because you're the person who suggested one of these to me, but everyone's going to answer this. What medium/program do you use to write?
Oh,
So
What meme?
Snidget,
What?
I
medium,
shall
Oh, medium.
evangelize.
Okay, I was confused.
not
Sorry.
meme. You can
Okay.
answer that if you want.
No, no.
I
Um,
shall evangelize and expand the cult of Scrivener.
so Snidget, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah.
Okay, so I discovered Scrivener from past podcast host Spicy Chestnut, and I discovered it because she was one of her past Tumblr posts was something about Scrivener this and Organizey this, and I was like, ooh,
Organizey.
what is this? Is shiny, and she was just raving about it, and I was like, okay. I was on Google Docs at the time, and my
Mhm.
outline was just growing and growing and growing, and I was scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and it took a while to get used to, but I tried the free trial,
Mhm.
which is a pretty neat um, design for that, because they say, oh, you have this many days, but it's not like you start it and then if you don't use it for 10 days, you still only have however many days left. It
Mhm.
starts from how often you're using it. So the actual time that you're taking to use it, that counts towards your free usage. So I felt that was really good and a good trial. And I started transitioning my story over. It was a bit of a hurdle, a bit of something to definitely get used to. But once I started finding my way around it and watching the
Mhm.
tutorials, and um, you can use it as much or as little works for you. And I found that I would just pretty much use the basic functions that I understood and could wrap my head around at the time. And the more and the longer I use it, the more features I'll use and try
Mhm.
out. And it is just a godsend for organization. Have a binder with all of the chapters, and you can search for things really easily. You have a corkboard view where you can have little note cards showing where things are going, and you can put pretty Zelda pictures in the background. You can even change the little icons to be like fun Zelda stuff. Like I got a little Link shield and a little heart container, and like the Gerudo symbol and the Goron symbol and the Rito symbol for when I've got chapters that focus on them, so I can see at a quick glance what's what. There's color coding. There's just all sorts of fun stuff. And if you are an organizational whore, this is the program for you.
Podcast is brought to you by Scrivener.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Scrivener. And how do you spell
Really.
that? Because now I'm intrigued. Scrivener, like
um,
with a K?
no, it's SCRI. Okay, let me for the audience members. I'll spell it clearer.
And for me.
S SCRIVENER.
Mm. Yes,
Scrivener.
Yes.
I shall
Scrivener.
definitely be
Yeah,
noting that.
yeah.
Yes.
I can. If you want me to, I'll send you a screenshot of my pretty setup, and then you can see
Ooh.
the
Yes,
potential.
please.
Go for it.
So Scrivener also has a cool podcast out at the moment where a guy interviews authors from all over the world, and they sort of talk a little bit about their history as a writer, and then they talk about how they use Scrivener, and it's amazing to hear all the different ways that these
Yeah,
different types of authors use it, and it has inspired me to use it in different ways as well. So it's
that's
pretty cool.
great. Kip, would you like to talk about what memes you use to write?
Well, no,
Memes.
I'm really
I was
intrigued
trying.
now.
No, I don't. I swear that I write fics only very seriously and never use memes ever. Except,
Ever?
well, okay, no, this is where I don't use them to plan fics, but sometimes if I'm incapable of describing a character and I just need to like keep their reaction to a certain moment later on, I'll just put like a little meme to be like, this
Road
character
work
feels
ahead.
like this.
Yeah, I sure hope it
Yeah.
does.
That is fascinating.
Or-
That's like a different version of the bracket technique, when they're like,
Yeah, no, it's
"You
when
get
I
stuck,
can't do the
use
bracket
bracket."
technique. I just put like a little SpongeBob guy and I'll be like,
Oh my
this is
god!
what they're
And
feeling here.
he's doing the big grin, like the cheesy grin.
Yeah.
That is such an
Great.
amazing thing to use. That's
That's great.
awesome. I
Thank
love
you.
it. Never would have
But
thought
Sure.
that.
I swear, other than that, I am very serious about like sort of planning. I did not. It's not all memes. I think I mostly use Google Docs because it's just what's convenient because you
Mhm.
can use it everywhere and it's the same thing in the drive and blah 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 blah.
Mhm.
But I also really like using.
I'm gonna do some editing.
Yeah.
A slug.
Craig
A
just didn't
slug.
like slugs. Sorry for
Slugs.
that cut in audio.
Yeah. So my answer to this question, I'm actually kind of on the fence right now. It's kind of odd because I do love Scrivener and all the functions to it, and I have a few projects on it right now, and it makes it really easy for organizing
Uh-huh.
where things go and everything. But at the same time, I use Google Docs for I guess it's happening where it's been Scrivener for longer works and then Google Docs for one shots.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Mm.
because Google Docs is um the way it's saved on the internet always. I have this
Mhm.
like really big fear of and it's happened before, where my internet crashes and then things are gone. That's kind of one of my big fears.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
do
why
backups of my bigger
I do
projects.
backups, but then I forget to do backups, and you never know. So
Mhm.
like the Google Docs kind of like helps me with that fear. Like I'm too afraid
Yep.
to use Scrivener all the time because
Oh
I'm
god.
dumb and my
I've
computer's
managed to
dumb.
almost lose good documents on both of them, so it's just a matter of user error, really.
Yeah, that's all me. So I kind of gravitate towards Google Docs, but I definitely have bigger projects on Scrivener.
Mm. Yeah, it's
And
good for
so
long
I
form.
am really on I hop between the fence, and it's going okay for now. I wish I was more organized with it because like now I just have random Google Docs that say this fic or that fic or and
Yeah.
I'd like it to be more organized. Maybe I'll make a folder or something. But yeah,
Yeah, like, put them into folders. Folders
yeah,
are your
that's a good
friend.
idea. That's a good idea. I just put in my head. Okay, I can do ideas. Okay. Writing them out, not so much. I have so many, like, not even works in progress, but, like, I've works in progress, but there's also, like, ideas that I've never, like, written out. It's like and they're
Mm.
just still floating in my head. It's like, I'll get to that eventually when
And
I have
that's
time.
what Tumblr is for.
Yes.
Yeah.
You just shout it to the void, and maybe some mice and rats will pick it up and make their own little thing, you know?
Well, speaking of shouting to the void, what Snidget, what would you like to promote? This is your self-promo section. What would you like
Oh my
to
goodness.
tell
Okay,
about people
so
about you
yeah,
and what
my
you're
I
doing?
suppose I would promote my biggest work that I just finished half of. So I've
Oh.
dropped its name a couple times during the show, but Insurrection
Mhm.
is my epic of post calamity where Zelda's, going on that journey where she's dealing with that grief and Link's dealing
Right,
with his
right,
memory loss and it
yeah.
sounds sort of like regular and cliche, but
Now it sounds
the Yiga,
fantastic.
I know, the Yiga are stirring up so much trouble because I thought, well,
As they
now that
always do.
as they do, like who's the new villain
Right.
in this new world? Like they think they've won and that they can relax, but nope. There is a successor to Koga, and it's
Mhm.
an OC villain named Vedra, and she's just
Oh,
causing all
is that
sorts
the
of
one you
trouble.
shared in the
Ooh.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, she's
Yeah.
and Jabberwocky Face artist has been collaborating with me on wonderful
Nice.
story art for that as well as She's done a lot of the work. She did my character creation for Vedra.
Mhm.
I've also had a lot of other collaborations from other artists like Frankie's Bugs, and oh gosh, now I feel bad because I'm like listing names and I can't remember them all. But they are
Uh,
they
I'm
are
going to. I'm
credited at
going.
the end of every chapter and also on every post on Tumblr. So everybody's credited everywhere for their wonderful work.
I'm going to link all those names in the description and everything we've
Uh-huh.
talked about. So I'm gonna go into. Well, that's a lot. I'm gonna go into and look at all the names you're talking about, or you can send them to me. Either one.
Yeah, I can send them. I'll just
Yeah,
I'll send them to you. That would be
send them. So
lovely.
I
So
really want to credit all those artists because like artists are magic.
they
I don't
are, and
really
it's
do
been
it.
a dream collaborating with people and getting, I made the decision when I started that long story to have art for each
Right.
chapter.
Yeah.
And, it is an expense, but it's well worth it. And
Mhm.
it's something I found worthy enough to do and to have.
Yeah.
And eventually I'm going to do in my own little, personal book printing and then like send a copy to my mom because shout out for
Oh,
moms.
Oh,
And
that's
moms are
cool.
great.
to have your own little published
Yeah.
master epic fic that you feel super proud of. It's going to be a
Yeah.
dream. So yeah, anyone wants a long epic to check out what the Yiga are up to post calamity, causing trouble for Link and Zelda, who are trying to navigate. Are they going to have a relationship? Will they? Won't they? It's a slow burn. So yeah, one of those. It's finished up to chapter 16 at the moment.
Okay.
That is considered part one, and then part two is going to be in production soon because I've had a nice long break, which I really, really needed.
Yeah.
Nice, yeah.
Everyone deserves a break.
Mm.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, I'm
So
also on. Yeah, I'm on Tumblr under
yes.
Snidgetwidgeon, and I just my blog is definitely Zelda focused. And that's the theme. So I reblog everyone's wonderful art and stories, as well as my own funny little memes and things that I do, which are few and far between. I mostly reblog, but once I have something, I do share.
Yes.
And I'm on AO3 as Snidgetwidgeon, and I have 11 works up now at this
Nice.
point. So yeah, big journey from about 3 years ago when I started. Actually, the end of this month is the 3-year anniversary of when I started the long story.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Wonderful.
Congratulations.
I feel
Lots of
very
things happening.
accomplished.
You
Yeah.
are very accomplished. Yay. Okay. Um well, we're gonna wrap up. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our audience members?
Oh, well, first of all, I would really like to thank you, Fate, for putting
Oh,
this
okay.
podcast together.
Hell
It's been
yeah.
You're
an
welcome.
amazing adventure and a wonderful idea and execution, and I've loved listening to everyone's fix.
Yeah.
I do have a bit of a backlog that I need to catch up on,
That's
but
okay.
yeah, the
They're all
struggle
really
is
good
real.
episodes. Like
They are.
there's no one episode where I'm like, "Oh, you should really watch." It's like every time I finish an episode I'm like, that was really good." You know?
It
Yeah.
really serves to
Yeah.
build this community and
Oh.
bonds between us and other writers, and just that feeling of we're all in this together and we all
Yeah.
love Zelda, and it's been
Yeah.
wonderful. So thank you so much for putting the time and the effort in, and your other co-hosts and everyone who's
Yeah.
contributed the clip
Yeah.
art and kept finding the screenshots and everything. So it's just wonderful,
Yeah.
and I'm really, really, really thankful to be a part of it. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh. Stop. That's not allowed. Okay. You're welcome. Uh so
Everyone love Fate in the comments
no,
too.
that's not okay. Thank you. What was I gonna say? Okay, so this is the second to last episode of this like season, if you will. I call it chapter to be all like booky, but
Mhm.
season. Um, the next episode is kind of my reward for finishing this season because I get to answer questions about my own fic. Um, so that's kind of like my yay, I finished. Now I get to talk about myself. Um,
Absolutely, you deserve it.
oh, okay. So that will be in a couple weeks, and then after that episode goes out, is this series is going to go on a small hiatus while I organize chapter 2 or season 2, if you will. So forums will like not really interest forums, but like feedback forums will go out and interest forums will go out. and will completely revamp their
Topics.
yeah. So it's going to be a whole new fandom.
Mm-hmm.
New
I think that's
fandom,
really cool that you get to,
new
branch
fix,
out into other things.
new authors. It could be there might be some of the same authors if they write for this specific fandom.
Mm-hmm.
It could be the same co-host if they agree to step on again, but it's very exciting. We're gonna have a shift. We've had a great season of Legend of Zelda Fix. I'm so proud of everyone that's participated and the people like Spicy was on here. Like what? Uh,
Whoop whoop.
you know.
Yeah.
And so in a couple weeks we'll have our last episode, which is me talking about a moment beyond, which is my colossal um fic that I've mentioned too much that I finally get to talk about, and then we'll start setting up for season 2. I don't know much about the fandom yet because that's gonna be decided based on the feedback form that
Mm-hmm.
people turn in. But just so to everyone, I'd like to say thank you for listening so far. Stay tuned and keep an eye out on our Tumblr for those Google forms. So yeah.
Nice.
Yep.
It's cast.
So
It's
until then,
podcast time.
until then, bye bye.
See
Bye.
ya.
It's podcast. It's podcast time.